Peter, thank you for agreeing to this interview this morning. And the question we have is, what is the relevance of organizational learning today?
Well, in one sense, I think the relevance of organizational learning today is the same as it's been since we've all been working to develop this field, which is really now, almost 3 decades, right? And Seoul, as a intentional global community, been growing for 2 decades, so it's a long time. And what I'm referring to in terms of what really hasn't changed is that the need for organizations individually to develop their capacities to learn, to adapt, to adjust, to be continuing to be relevant as well as vibrant and healthy as the world around them changes. The pace of change in the world hasn't exactly slowed down. And the degree, it's not just the pace of change. I think people have been talking in those terms for 20 plus years. It's really the turbulence and uncertainty. Nowadays, compared to when Seoul was first being organized 20 years ago, you hear a lot more people talking about disruptive change, which is another way of saying high degrees of uncertainty and relatively significant shifts in markets, in expectations, and of course in the larger social and environmental context in which businesses operate. I mean, we started the Seoul Sustainability Consortium in 1998, 1999, so over 15 years ago, because it was just starting to be a recognition amongst a lot of businesses that these larger issues of social and ecological imbalance were really going to shape their future. They were strategic issues. They weren't just, public relations, corporate social responsibility type of issues. They were really critical to the future of the business. And I would say that was the time period when that awakening was starting to occur. Nowadays, I think everybody realizes that the larger context in which their organization is functioning is highly unpredictable, turbulent, disruptive. All those words are really commonplace today. So the need for organizations to individually, as an entity, to be able to build their capacity to perceive changes, to recognize, to adapt and adjust, and where possible to be really proactive, to be part of the kind of positive changes people would like to see. I think that need has gone up and up. The problem is, of course, that people can talk about that. They can talk and talk and talk and talk. The question is, what can you do? Can your organization actually be more adaptive, fluid, flexible, resilient, robust, ultimately, in the face of lots of changes? So I think the need has grown dramatically, and the perceived need has grown dramatically. Whether or not the capacity, the capability of organizations to actually continually learn has grown, that's a much bigger question. Because at the same time, this degree of, let's say, the degree of disruptiveness in the environment has gone up, the frenzy, the frustration with, jumping back and forth and, not enough time to do anything. You might say ultimately, not enough time to think, not enough time to reflect and to kind of make sense of very complex disruptive changes so that you can have some sense of where is our market going, where is our country going, where is our region and going. That's gone down probably, so while the need to adapt and adjust and learn has gone up, you might say the inherent capacity, the conditions have gotten worse, and that gap has grown a lot. That doesn't mean that's impossible. It just means that you've really got to learn to slow down. You've got to learn to create environments where people really can reflect, can really think together. So I think at the level of individual organizations, the case for organizational learning, so to speak, or the case for building capabilities internally to continually learn is stronger now than ever. And that's why you see both organizations have been at this a long time, doing better than a lot of their competitors, and more organizations seeing the need for it. So that's what I would characterize all of that is the case for individual organizations to build capabilities to learn, the case for individual organizational learning. But what's, I would say, even more important today, and certainly the focus for me and all the people I work with, is really the connecting of multiple organizations, regions, business supply chains, whole industry groupings, so that we can really build our capacity to collaborate and learn and adjust together amongst many organizations. Where we are right now is a location where 13 years ago, actually, the beginnings of what has become the global food lab network began to form. And that was originally formed by Unilever and Oxfam, two very, very different organizations. Unilever, one of the largest food companies in the world; Oxfam, one of the, maybe the largest, certainly in Europe, the most well-known and respected social justice NGO focused on the plight of rural farmers, started to realize that even though they saw the world very differently, their different ways of seeing the world really needed to come together, because the reliability of Unilever's food chains ultimately depends on the well-being of the agricultural production sectors in many different places in the world. And the plight of the rural poor, the farmers being driven off their land and not being able to invest in any meaningful way in real improvements in quality and production, was getting greater. And so that's a really good example of two very different types of organizations. Let's just say the business sector and civil society realizing that they really had to work together. And no one knew how to do that. And I would say that too is a huge trend in the world. I don't think, if you could do a word count on the word collaboration, I mean, it's used so much more frequently today than it would have been used 10 years ago even. Everybody is trying to collaborate. But again, how? How to do that? It's one thing to talk about it. And I asked somebody recently, you're always talking about collaboration. What does that mean practically? He said, I go to meetings with a lot of people I didn't used to go to meetings with. So this kind of different types of organizations being thrown together in a pot and saying, you guys need to collaborate, that didn't happen at all.